Stephen A. Smith admitted some wild bias about Lamar Jackson. We talk about what he said. Plus, the Baltimore Ravens wide receivers are finally getting national love. We talk about all that and more coming up next here on this Purple Friday edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. Subscribe to the channel, and also in audio form, follow along and subscribe. 5 days a week of Ravens content, Monday through Friday, plus bonus episodes, game reactions, pre-game episodes as well. We have a ton of Ravens content always for you here on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Here with me, our Purple Friday guest, as always, it is Sam Njoku of the Ravens Talk podcast. And Sam, another Ravens win. We were talking about this team at 0-2 of like, oh man, they really need to get it going. And look, to their credit, over this last month, including week 6, they certainly have done so.
Yeah, I'm very surprised by how the Ravens have come and got it together. I mean, I expected them to get it going. I mean, losing to the Chiefs, no one's surprised, but losing to the Raiders was definitely a sour taste in the mouths of both the fans and the organization. But winning 4 straight and doing so in dominant fashion, at least on offense, definitely gives you a good feeling heading towards this second of 3 quarters of the season, I would say. The second lap of, I think, a 3-lap season, so to speak. So the Ravens are doing pretty good, and hopefully they continue to do such.
It is crazy that we are a third of the way done. We're a month and a half into the season. Again, it's just like every week the season feels like it just started yesterday. And like we were just talking about that Ravens Chiefs opener, and now we're here. We're in week 7. The Ravens gearing up for their 3rd primetime game of the season already. They've done it on Thursday night. They've done it on Sunday night. Now it's the Monday night game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we're obviously going to dive into that more a little bit later in the show. But first, Sam, there was a very wild segment this morning or yesterday morning over on ESPN, and got a lot of people taking sides on what Stephen A. Smith meant by his comments over on First Take. And look, Stephen A., he's been the center of a lot of controversy surrounding Lamar Jackson, a lot of takes that aren't necessarily fair towards Lamar, and we've talked about all that. Obviously, I think the biggest one of those is probably was Lamar worth the money, that whole thing that happened. But Stephen A. talked about, it was the Jets. It was a segment about the Jets. Somehow Lamar Jackson made it into a segment about the Jets. But it was about Super Bowl or bust for the Jets. And he was talking about Patrick Mahomes and how he just kind of has this different expectation. And when you play Patrick Mahomes, there's a different expectation for all quarterbacks of like, well, if it's Patrick Mahomes and he beats you, okay, that's just Patrick Mahomes. That's not the quarterback. But then he goes, anybody who runs into and ultimately loses to Patrick Mahomes has a pass, except for actually, I would debate Lamar Jackson. And so everybody was like, either one of 2 trains of thought here. One of them was, this is utterly ridiculous. Why is Lamar the one that doesn't get a pass? Why does Josh Allen get a pass? Why does Joe Burrow get a pass? Why is Lamar held to a different standard than everybody else? And he has to be the one where if he loses, it's his fault. But if anybody else loses, oh, well, that's just Patrick Mahomes. And, that's just that's just Mahomes and how good he is. The other train of thought is Stephen A. holds Lamar in such high regard that he does hold him to a different standard because Stephen A. believes that he is better than Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and those other quarterbacks. Therefore, he is held to a higher standard where these other quarterbacks are like, oh, it's okay. Like, you tried, but you just couldn't beat the big guy. Whereas for Lamar, it's like, okay, you're great. We know you're great. So the expectation is to go out and you beat the other greats. Which side of this are you on? Because I'm very curious just how it kind of turned into a tale of 2 sides for everybody.
I'm going to give him some grace and say that he's thinking that Lamar Jackson is the upper echelon along with Patrick Mahomes, and he has the best chance to do what many have failed to do, and that's beat Patrick Mahomes in the postseason and get his ticket into the Super Bowl. I think that will be my train of thought. I think it's a ridiculous notion for him to bring it up, especially during the Jet segment, as you said. But all in all, I would give him the credit because I think when it's all said and done, and we've seen it this season, Lamar Jackson has played very well. I mean, we've seen him. He's played better than Patrick Mahomes. Let's call a spade a spade. He's played better than the other quarterbacks in the AFC. So I get where he's coming from in that notion. It's just unfortunate to hear because, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, that combo together is deadly. We started in the AFC Championship game. We've seen it throughout Patrick Mahomes' career. And it's held a lot of quarterbacks back, including Lamar Jackson. But to put him and have him be that guy that has to be the guy that beats Patrick Mahomes, and if he doesn't, he's a failure, is where I think a lot of Ravens fans get that great. But all in all, I think it's true that Lamar Jackson has the best chance to beat Patrick Mahomes. And if he doesn't, then there may be some criticism because you hold him to such a high standard. But hearing what I've seen from Stephen A. Smith throughout the years, it does kind of feel like he's just putting him in a little bit of a different category as far as standards go, and probably has nothing to do with Lamar Jackson, the player. But in my opinion, Lamar Jackson deserves to be in that conversation. And if he's not able to get it done, then there is some criticism that needs to be had. But all in all, I think it doesn't really matter. I think Lamar Jackson is a phenomenal quarterback. And I think right now, as I mentioned, he's the best quarterback in the league by far.
And I think, too, it's just like this narrative, or these narratives, I guess, that we've heard from Stephen A. over the years are just like, okay, he's openly admitting this, like on live TV to everybody about like, well, Lamar is held to a different standard than everybody else. Whether you think he is arguing that in terms of, oh, Lamar's great, or we're just holding him to a different standard because X, Y, and Z, it is kind of crazy to kind of hear it be admitted in the way that he did it. But I do think that, again, we see segments about, oh, Lamar has to do more with less, or at least he has over the course of the early part of his career. And when his receivers fall short, right? When his receivers had those drops in the Pittsburgh game, in the Tennessee game, in the divisional round, when Lamar put up, 500 total yards in that game, it was, okay, it's Lamar. But then when a Josh Allen loses, when a Joe Burrow loses, it was the defense, or it was the receivers, or it was the coaching staff. And it's that kind of thing that I think just kind of gets a lot of people who root for the Ravens, root for Lamar Jackson, riled up, because it's like, man, everybody should be held to a standard where, yes, if you are a great quarterback, the standard should be higher for you. Like 100% agree with that. Where we're talking Super Bowls with Lamar. We're not talking wild card wins anymore. We're not talking making the playoffs anymore. That's ridiculous. We know that the standard for this Ravens team and Lamar Jackson, because he is so good, is to make it to a Super Bowl. But when it comes to the standard of these guys, yeah, I mean, I think Lamar, one, he's playing like the best quarterback in the league right now. I say based off of play, he is the best quarterback in the NFL at this moment. Obviously, accolades and Super Bowls, Mahomes is the best quarterback with those. But it should be with some of those other guys, the criticism for Lamar is not the same as it is for others, where you see Lamar's name on the headlines for criticism himself a lot more unfairly than you would see with other guys. And that, I think, is where all of the, I guess, ire to what Stephen A. has said here is coming out.
Yeah, and it's kind of ridiculous when you watch the games and you understand that a lot of these guys aren't watching film, they're looking at highlights. You see Lamar Jackson maybe overthrow a receiver. Patrick Mahomes overthrows receivers. Josh Allen overthrows receivers. It's a part of the game. So I definitely feel the frustration from fans when you see these guys go on national TV and pretty much thrash Lamar Jackson for being, a quarterback who's learning, who's growing, who's going to make mistakes, because he is in fact human, even though sometimes he does look like he is superhuman out there on the football field. So I definitely understand the ire from the football fans out there, especially Lamar Jackson fans. But when it's all said and done, this is going to continue, whether we like it or not, until Lamar Jackson wins that Lombardi trophy. And maybe afterwards even, can you win a second one? Can you win a third one? So unfortunately, for whatever reason, this is going to be pinned on Lamar Jackson. And the only way it's going to get done is if he at least wins one.
Yeah, and the best part about it is the Ravens don't care. Lamar doesn't care. He's like, and he said that yesterday on Thursday, excuse me. He ended up saying, look, they're going to say what they say. You remember that 0-2 feeling, they were talking crazy, all that stuff. And now the narratives are different and they'll come up with whatever. So again, yes, Lamar's going to be held to a high standard because he is one of the best in this league. He plays like one of the best every single season. He's a 2-time MVP. With each MVP that gets stacked up on your resume, that obviously increases that. With each Super Bowl that's on your resume, it increases that as well. And so, look, Joe Burrow has made one Super Bowl. Josh Allen has not won an MVP or made a Super Bowl. And so you can say, oh, well, Lamar has the MVP, so of course he's going to be held to a higher standard. But at the same time, it's like, well, the things that sometimes Lamar gets criticized for, the other people don't get criticized. So the quarterbacks don't get criticized for it. And that is kind of like, you can talk about making or missing throws or this, that, and the other. Fair criticism is fair. Fair criticism is fine. Lamar's not a perfect player. Mahomes isn't a perfect player. Burrow, Allen, any of those guys aren't. But when you actively make up one narrative surrounding, let's say, wide receiver drops for one guy and then another for another, and they're not equal, that's where it is. So I genuinely, because Dan Orlovsky, by the way, in this clip, just looks flabbergasted the entire time. He's throwing his hands up. He's looking at him like, what in the world are you saying right now? Like, there's no way you're saying this. So his reaction gives me pause of like, which way did Stephen A mean this? But when I saw that clip for the first time, my jaw was kind of like, whoa.
Yeah.
It was kind of on the floor a little bit of like, okay, now we're finally hearing it. Whether he meant it as Lamar is great or meant it as, well, I'm just going to hold Lamar to this standard and, not hold anybody else to that standard. We know Mahomes is the guy that the AFC runs through. Stephen A said that. I agree. I know everybody does. That Chiefs team is back-to-back champs. Mahomes is a 3-time Super Bowl champion. If you want to get to where you want to go, it runs through the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. But like you said, Sam, I do think out of all the quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson is probably the one that I would trust the most. And I know people are going to bring off the playoffs and, he doesn't play well in the playoffs. I'm throwing that aside of like, talent-wise and the way that he has looked this season, I think that he is the best guy to throw in that conversation of who can finally dethrone this Kansas City Chiefs team. But coming up in the second part of the show, the Ravens wide receivers are getting national love. And I still don't kind of know how to feel about it because this is such a weird feeling about the Ravens wide receivers. And everybody's like, hey, these guys are actually doing their thing now. So we'll talk about who's giving them love, what they're saying, all that and more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Lamar Jackson rookie card, Zay Flowers rookie card, that's just not in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card listed was hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. And for Arena Club slab packs, there's a lot to love. The display of the available cards is incredible. The hit rates, there's plenty that you can hit on, and the grading is top notch. It's much better than those mystery packs that you might have purchased in the past. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent with a full grade rationale provided, an explanation of how your card was scored. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL. Code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. And the show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks has so much that they have to offer, and I love going on Prize Picks, seeing all the new things each time I go on. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money for this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds to turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. So for this Ravens and Bucs game Monday night, if you want more on Lamar Jackson passing yards, more on Baker Mayfield passing yards, you can do that over on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code LockedOnNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LockedOnNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. We are back. Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Sam Njoku still talking with you on this Purple Friday. Sam, the Ravens wide receivers have been, I think, really good to start this season. Obviously, Zay is doing his thing. I think Rashad Bateman, he's a guy that is stepping up in his role this year. And I think the last 2 weeks, he's played some of the best football of his career. But it's not just the people who cover the Ravens locally or the Ravens themselves or Ravens fans who are seeing that. this has now expanded to the national scale. And, obviously, Sam, you and I have been watching, covering, whatnot with this team for a while. And wide receivers have always been that, it's the Ravens. They're not going to have good wide receivers. They struggle developing wide receivers. Well, you're hearing national love. Troy Aikman was talking on DFW Ticket 96.7 over there and talked about Dallas's receivers, saying that, the routes there are terrible. They run terrible routes. It's not just a this year thing. CD has to improve his route running, this, that, and the other. And then he went into detail. He's saying, I just finished watching the Baltimore Ravens because I have them this week. You put on film of theirs and watch their receivers run routes, and they come off of the football. And he also compared that to San Francisco and Green Bay. And so he obviously looped it all back to Dak and saying, like, the routes, him being a former quarterback, that all has to get better. But the fact that Troy Aikman turned on this Ravens tape and came away, there are a lot of things you can come away with from watching Ravens tape. One of the big things that he felt the need to publicize was that the Ravens receivers are running their routes effectively, getting off the ball and punishing one-on-one in the correct matchups. I mean, Sam, it's been a long time since we've heard something like this about a Ravens wide receiver group.
Yeah, and I think it was about week 4 where I had that epiphany in my head. Was like, wow, this receiver group is pretty good. Maybe they're top halves in the league. Maybe they're top 10 in the league. And it just kept going and going. And finally, to get that national recognition pretty much solidifies my belief that this receiver group is good. Zay Flowers, second-year pro. I mean, you don't realize the jump that some of these guys make from year 1 to year 2. Zay Flowers was pretty much playing off of ability, instinct, natural talent. And in year 2, you're starting to see things that you didn't see in year 1. Starting to see him be more of a push start receiver at the line of scrimmage, attacking opposing DBs during run plays, and just being able to feint off his route running abilities at the point of attack. In year 2, Rashad Bateman, a guy I talked about last year, having Odell Beckham Jr. take away some of his snaps, learning from Odell Beckham Jr. So you're starting to see his game matriculate. His separation is steadily remaining the same. He still has that ability to create separation, gaining rapport with Lamar Jackson now, not being injured through the offseason, having that connection with Lamar Jackson be complete. And then Tylan Wallace, great run blocker, great receiver of the football in his own right. Maybe not as talented as the first 2 guys, but great as well. We know what Nelson Aguilar can do. We've seen Deontay Hardy at times. Tez Walker hasn't gotten on the field yet, but we saw what he can possibly do when he was in North Carolina. So this receiver group is steadily impressing me week after week. And couple that with what we have Derrick Henry, couple that with what we have with Lamar Jackson, it's looking very nice. The Ravens weren't able to get Devontae Adams, a guy that a lot of Ravens fans were on their wish list, wishful thinking, obviously, but to have this receiver group the way it is now, you can't really ask for a better group. And I dare say this might be the best receiver group the Ravens have ever had. I mean, a motion can be made that 2012 with Anquan Bolden, they were really good as well. But this group is really impressing me so far. Only 6 weeks, but very impressed.
Yeah, and I know we talked about it, but Tez Walker's just getting that Iman Marshall treatment of does he exist or not? Is he a real person? Apparently, he was helping out Nate Wiggins after practice on Thursday, getting his head around on the ball a little bit, which, Sam, we know some of these Ravens DBs have to learn to turn their head around on the ball a little bit. But hey, Tez is real, everybody. All right, he'll get a shot at some point here, but like you said, Sam, they don't necessarily need that right now, because of Zay and Rashad Bateman. You mentioned Nelson Aguilar, Tylan Wallace, these guys. It's like, okay, this is honestly probably like a better case scenario for them, because if they were relying on Tez Walker in a huge role this season already, it would probably mean something had gone wrong with Nelson Aguilar. They were dealing with injuries or just something wasn't right. They've been hitting on mostly all cylinders this season. It's been really, really cool to watch. Now, we'll take a brief intermission from the national level. We'll get back to it in a few minutes. But since you brought up Davante Adams, I have to ask you about the whole situation as we kind of officially put a bow on this situation, right? I know you and I have been talking about it now ever since that trade chatter got started. Goes to the Jets. You got Amari Cooper going to the Bills, 2-3 hours later. Yeah. Crazy day on Tuesday. But we talked about it. Would have been awesome, but never seemed realistic. Now, if the Ravens want a receiver, they can pivot to potentially guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Courtland Sutton, Mike Williams is now apparently available after the Jets go and get Devontae. Do any of those guys pique your interest, or like you've said, are you kind of like, the Ravens don't really need a receiver right now because everybody's performing up to the level they need to?
I'm slowly leaning towards they don't really need a receiver. It's unbelievable that I'm saying this in 2024. I mean, I've been an advocate for a receiver forever, but it's looking like they don't really need him. I mean, you can make a case that they could probably improve the WR3 spot wide receiver 3 role by getting the Cortland Sutton, as you mentioned, at DeAndre Hopkins. Somebody, maybe a go up and get him guy, something that the Ravens really haven't had since, as I mentioned, Anquan Bolden. But if they were to stand pat right now, I think they'd be fine. I think they would be okay. I think if the right situation comes along, and EDC is always working, let me tell you, he's always on the phones trying to find out what he can do to get this team to be even better. But they're the top ranked offensive team in the league. They're doing things that we really haven't seen anyone do. We talked about the rushing attack. I think they've had, like, through the first 6 weeks, the most rushing yards as opposed to the opposing team in NFL history through the first 6 weeks. So it's hard to really justify them getting a receiver. But if you can get better, get better. So I wouldn't be surprised if the clamoring for a wide receiver does increase. If you hear the national media talk about potential phone calls that the Ravens are making to make that move, because really the Ravens have Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers as this top 2 tandem that's comparable to some of the greats in the league right now. And then there's a pretty steep drop off after that in terms of talent. So the Ravens want to get better as a passing team and kind of reach the potential that the rushing attack is, then maybe they go out and get a receiver. But no harm, no foul right now. Maybe it's not really necessary. There's other areas of concern that the Ravens could address via the trade deadline, and maybe receiver's not one of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you can get better, go out there and get better. You know, I think that they could certainly use a guy like DeAndre Hopkins as like a third wide receiver. Cortland Sutton, I think, maybe pushes the boundary a little too much of like, oh, what's it going to take to get him? And, you know, are you taking snaps away from guys at that point? Like, I don't want to take snaps away from Rashad Bateman. Like, that's not something that I think the Ravens should want to do either. Like, he's performed well. And so Cortland would improve. You kind of have a 2A, 2B situation with Cortland Sutton and Rashad Bateman. How that split would work, I don't really know. Yeah. But to me, like, Mike Williams doesn't move the needle enough for me. Like, I think DeAndre is like that perfect in the middle guy. But here's the thing, and I've said this, Sam, and you kind of echoed it right there, is the Ravens don't have to act at this deadline with desperation. If they decide to do nothing, they don't need to come from a place of, we need a wide receiver, let's go overpay for someone that's not going to help us. Like, they don't need to do that, because if they decide to stand pat, their wide receivers have proven that in this offense, it works. And with that running game, with everything that you mentioned there, if they get a wide receiver, great. If it improves that team, great. But there are other areas, like you mentioned, you know, secondary, I know, is one a lot of people are kind of looking towards. I don't necessarily know where a guy would play. I just think they have to kind of work with what they have right now. But at the end of the day, they have options. I know it's not the flashy, like 6 all-pro names or whatever. Like they haven't signed like one of those big flashy names. I mean, Nelson Aguilar is the biggest, you know, veteran name they have on that crew right now. So I think that, look, if they make a move, awesome. If they don't, awesome. Like, either way, it's fine. But Sam, you also had Mina Kimes and Benjamin Solak over on ESPN talk about the Ravens and the play action, something that you yourself referenced on your breakdown over on the Ravens Talk podcast and that YouTube channel over there. But the thing that I love about, one, what you had to say, and two, what Mina and Ben obviously echoed here on this, is that for Lamar Jackson this season, he's averaging his lowest depth of target off of play action and his highest first down rate. A lot of that play action game really over the course of Lamar's career has been, we're going to fake the handoff, send a guy on a deep route, just chuck that thing up and see what happens. But they're working a lot more short routes, intermediate routes into those play action concepts, a lot more quick hitters. And I thought it was funny that Ben said in his breakdown that, it's kind of like the Ravens reverse stumbled into the Shanahan offense of like, well, what if we get these guys behind the linebackers and like see what happens here? It's like, whoa, this is crazy for a running team that uses multiple tight ends, Patrick Ricard, they have Derrick Henry, but Mina and Ben say it, like the play action game that the Ravens are working off of with their heavy sets, team selling out to stop the run and allowing Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman and these receivers to work one-on-one, using the tight ends effectively too. That is one of the big things that makes this Ravens offense so dangerous.
Yeah, and I looked at it on film, and it's really good. And then we talked about the Ravens needing a receiver. 12 personnel is killing these guys. 12 and 13 personnel, having 1 or 2 receivers on the field, having the 2 tight ends, which I think is a big part of their play action success. is killing these opposing defenses. So there really isn't a need to bring in a third receiver because they're not going to see the field. I mean, they're having so much success with 12 personnel, and they're finally understanding to use Zay Flowers' ability. Zay Flowers could be a deep threat. I mean, he has that potential, but he's excellent as a route runner. He's excellent in the intermediate and short routes because by the time he gets that first step, he's fooling the defender most times because of his ability to release at the line of scrimmage. So all of these factors and what Todd Monken probably saw in the offseason has led them to a very great play action pass attack that you cannot downplay. I mean, you have to stop the run. And if you're stopping the run, you're susceptible. If you're overselling to stop the run, I should say, you're very susceptible to the play action. And the Ravens have taken full advantage of opposing defenses, leaving 7 or 8 guys in the box at all times. You got to have these guys in the box to stop Derrick Henry. So it's just a masterful, well-played game plan by Todd Monken through these first 6 weeks, and expected to continue because the Bucs are not very good at stopping the play action pass at all. They're almost dead last in the league in almost every major statistical category when it comes to play action. So the Ravens are using the play action well. I don't expect anyone to stop them anytime soon. And it's great that Mina Kimes and others have finally noticed that this offense is matriculating and gaining traction. And big shout outs to Todd Monken because his play concepts are night and day from what we saw from Greg Roman in his tenure here. So they're fooling these DBs. They're overloading sides, doing high-low techniques, getting these guys separation. So it's tough sledding for these opposing defenses. Defensive coordinators are not sleeping well, I promise you.
To your point, Mina actually put out the exact stats. You mentioned Tampa is almost dead last in every single play action category defensively. They're 29th in EPA per play, 29th in opposing QBR, 31st in success rate against opposing play action. So,
boy,
talk about defensive coordinators not sleeping tonight. Well, man, in Tampa Bay right now, there might be a restless defensive coordinator getting ready for this Baltimore Ravens team coming to town on Monday night. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll be getting into some Ravens and Bucs analysis. We'll be breaking down a little bit more of what happened over the course of the week as well. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So to get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bets for the Ravens and Bucs game coming up on Monday night. Ravens open up on FanDuel is 3.5-point favorite. So if you like the road favorite in Baltimore, maybe you like the home underdog in Tampa Bay, be sure to pick your side over on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. We are back with Locked On Ravens with Sam Njoku. I am Kevin Ostraker. And, of course, here on Locked On Ravens, we bring you 5 days a week of daily Ravens covers, Monday through Friday. Also have bonus episodes as well. I say it every week, Sam, for bonus episodes, wherever the headlines take us. And last week, we have more crazy headlines. So it just seems like there's going to be a crazy headline every single day that we're going to have to talk about here. So TBD on bonus episodes, but I think we're going to have a couple bonus episodes this weekend if history does repeat itself. So be sure to stay tuned for all that. Like and subscribe, video form, audio form. Appreciate all of the support. Sam, Zay Flowers went on Good Morning Football, and he had a couple of things to say. One, he poked fun at Lamar Jackson, saying he's a clown. You know, he might look all serious, but he's just joking around all the time and doing his thing, which I think, you know, Lamar being in year 7 and being able to see him, yeah, we know Lamar is kind of that jokester.
Yeah.
But he also talked about, you know, he was asked, the Ravens receivers, there's all this notion of like, receivers in Baltimore. There's narratives about them and what goes on. And Zay said, yeah, okay, you know, there's a narrative, but guess what? Y'all don't have Derrick Henry. So let's see what you do about Derrick Henry. He said that you got to balance it out. If your rushing game is good, you just got to keep going with what's winning you games. And the thing that I love about this, Sam, one is he's like telling teams, yeah, guess what? We have this and you don't. So ha. But also, this isn't like an ego thing for any of these guys. Like, they want to win. This is not Zay saying, oh, yeah, well, you know, it'd be cool to have 10 targets a game, but yeah, it's just kind of, it's what work. It's what, you know, whatever. No, Zay is like, hey, you know what? We have this guy. We're winning because we have this guy. And if it's working and we're winning, I don't care. I don't care what it is. So I thought that was awesome for Zay to kind of put that on display and say, hey, you know, we know who we are and we can do a lot of different things to beat a team.
Yeah, and you kind of roll your eyes when John Harbaugh talks about receivers who want to be here, are going to be here and be successful, and yada, yada, yada. We've had receivers in the past voice their concerns with the offense in the past, and some of that's valid, but for the most part, John Harbaugh wants guys in here who want to win. And from that clip that you saw, that's clearly Zay Flowers that wants to win and would do so by any means necessary. Now, Zay Flowers is having a phenomenal year. I mean, we could talk about Zay Flowers to the cows come home because he's such a phenomenal talent, but he understands that this team was a run-first team, and Derrick Henry is setting Zay Flowers up for success. So definitely love the mindset that Zay Flowers has. There are going to be times when guys are going to load 8 or 9 guys in the box and have success, and they're going to have to lean on Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and company to get the job done. But Zay Flowers knows that this team will go where Derrick Henry goes, and he has to be ready when his number is called in different situations to ball out, because he is, in fact, their number one receiver right now, and he's playing very well.
He absolutely is. And I love that everybody else opens up opportunities for everybody else. It's, Lamar opens up opportunities for Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry opens up opportunities for Zay. Zay opens up opportunities for Lamar. Everybody's open up opportunities for everybody. And that's how this offense is a well-oiled machine, because it's like, all right, you stop one of our guys, we have 3 more we're going to throw at you. Good luck. And that's why, again, you add another weapon to the offense. Awesome. If you don't, I think you're well equipped to move forward with what you have. But Sam, let's do a quick speed run through the Commanders game in week 6. Obviously, great quarterback battle between Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels in this one. You got Lamar going for 323 and a touchdown with the, Mark Andrews glance off the hands interception there at the beginning. You also got Jaden Daniels with 269, 2 passing touchdowns in there as well. I mean, the thing that I thought was the key in this game, Sam, multiple different things, but 60% on third down for the Ravens, only 33% for the Commanders. Baltimore, 500 total yards almost. The Commanders just over 300. What'd you kind of think of this game? And I mean, look, we have to give all the credit in the world to Jaden Daniels. I thought, again, he looked good in this game, but Lamar Jackson is just showing that he continues to ascend each and every single week.
Yeah, I love what I saw from Lamar Jackson. Jaden Daniels played very well, as you mentioned. And this game, even though it was a 7-point lead, it wasn't really a 7-point lead. It was really a 2-touchdown lead, and the Commanders tried to make their best to make a comeback of it. But really, the Ravens dominated this game, and we talked about it last week. This is what we expected. The Ravens are too good on offense, and you really need to be prepared to handle a team like this on a regular basis. And being an NFC team, you're not going to see Lamar Jackson off. And in fact, the Commanders, unless they go to the Super Bowl with the Ravens, are not going to see the Ravens again in regular season action until 2028. So having that familiarity with Lamar Jackson is just paramount to have success, and the Commanders did not have it. Now, the defense for the Ravens, I think, showed me some things that led me to believe, okay, there's a chance that this could be a positive thing by the end of the season. They definitely played a little more aggressive. I was very concerned that they were going to take a step back after that Bengals game, but the DBs made sure that they were aggressive, stood pat, were not afraid of Terry McLaurin. Of course, he did have that touchdown grab in the end zone. There was a bit of a miscommunication by the safety group, but for the most part, this DB group is looking like they're going to trend positively. I know they brought in Dean Pease to come in and help Zachary out, and hopefully as the weeks progress, you'll see some of that maturation and sort of that communication improve, and that's what the Ravens want to see. But all in all, I thought this team just started firing off cylinders, and they continue this trend. I mean, it's only week 6. This is not the best that we're going to see from the Ravens, but if what we're saying now is any indication of where this team will go come January, watch out.
Yeah, still a long way to go, and hopefully they can work out the remainder of what they need to. And I thought, Sam, the Commanders could get anything they wanted from their own 20 to the Ravens' 35-yard line. And then after that, the Ravens defense tightened up, bend, don't break. They certainly scored a couple touchdowns, certainly drove down a couple of times. But I also thought there were game-saving plays almost, like Lamar Jackson tackling Mike Sandstro on that interception. The Commanders get 3 points. If Lamar's just like, I don't want to really get involved with this, he runs 7 points. He saved 4 points. Ben Cleveland getting the hand up on the field goal team, man. Hey, that's 3 points. 4 plus 3. You get 7 points in a 7-point game. Those are game-saving plays. Now, moving on to Tampa Bay, obviously this is a big Monday night matchup. Last time the Ravens were down in Tampa Bay a couple years ago, Isaiah Likely had a great game. Lamar was spreading the ball around, much like we see him doing this season. A couple players I have to watch in this one, Sam. Rashad Bateman, Isaiah Likely, Roquan Smith. I think Rashad is doing great things this year. I mean, again, these last 2 weeks I've been super impressed with him finding zones, getting into his area. Isaiah's a guy that, seemingly technically is like stat-wise boom or bust, but he does so much for this team. And honestly, his gravity, that's the word I love to use with this team. His gravity draws people to him. And I know there's been conversations around Roquan Smith, kind of how he's performing this season, some good and some bad. So those are three players that I have. How do you think Baltimore matches up with the Buccaneers? And are there any other players you have your eye on?
I think the Ravens match up pretty good. I think there's some things that I saw from the Bucs the first 6 weeks that lead me to believe they might be a little more prepared to handle this Ravens rushing attack. They do run a heavy set in the box a majority of the time. I think they're fifth in the league as far as having 7 or 8 guys in the box. So that's something that they can use to their advantage, not being too concerned about getting ready for having that massive humanity in the middle of the field and how to operate around that. So that's one thing I always look at. But other than that, it's looking kind of rough. I mean, we mentioned it. Play action is a heavy concern for the Bucs. They don't really do well with the play action. The Ravens have had opportunities with 8 guys in the box and had success. They're tossing it off tackle, taking advantage of the opportunities that the defense presents to them, because a lot of teams are really trying to prevent runs inside the tackle, and the Ravens are tossing it, screen plays to get those linebackers moving. So that's something that the Ravens could use to their advantage. On the defensive side of the ball, I like the matchup. I like Marlon Humphrey versus Mike Evans. Now, Mike Evans got dinged up in the last game, and we're not sure if he's going to play. I would say he does play, considering it's a Monday night game. So, but I like that matchup. I like the interior look that the Bucs sometimes give opposing defenses, opposing offenses. But I think for sure the Ravens need to watch out for the middle of the field, because the Bucs do have great success in the middle of the field. So if Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, like you mentioned earlier, maybe a safety of the likes of Eddie Jackson or Marcus Williams, those are the key guys that need to make sure that they're making sure the middle of the field is contained, because Baker Mayfield loves to throw in the middle of the field, and he has great success in that regard. And having a guy like Chris Godwin, who's been pretty good. If you play fantasy football, Godwin has had a stellar season so far. So the Ravens need to watch out for that. But all in all, this is more of the same. Not much familiarity with the Ravens team. I don't see the Ravens being stopped in the NFC team by the Bucs. But if there's an NFC team that has a chance, it'll be this one, because they do have the receivers that the Ravens often struggle with in the past. And they do understand the concept of having guys in the box. But as I mentioned, having guys in the box leaves you susceptible to the play action pass. And that's why the Bucs have struggled so much.
And that lines up almost perfectly, Sam, with my keys here. It seems like you and I have always been on the same wavelength here with those keys. Shut down the star wide receivers. The way this graphic looks, you put an A in the middle of W and R as Star Wars. But no, star wide receivers. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. We've talked about this, Sam. Devontae Adams, don't let him beat you. Devontae Adams beat you. Jamar Chase, don't let him beat you. Goes for almost 200. A guy like Terry didn't necessarily put up big yardage numbers, but don't let Terry beat you. He has 2 touchdowns. So shut down the star wideouts as best you can. You're not going to be able to do it perfectly, but stop him as best you can. Make that a habit. Also, be able to force bad Baker Mayfield throws. Make him uncomfortable. You mentioned he likes throwing the middle of the field. Clog that up. Make him go to the outside, make him try that and see if the Ravens secondary can make him pay for that. And obviously mistake-free football, kind of the stuff we've been echoing for a while, Sam. That's kind of what I have for the keys. Is there anything else that you would like to see Baltimore do?
I would love for the Ravens to play aggressive on defense. I mean, I know for sure that you have Baker Mayfield with Mike Evans, with Chris Godwin. So that's a fear that Ravens defenders may have, but don't play this team the way you played the Bengals. Play them the way you played the Bills. Play them the way you played the Washington Commanders last week. Be aggressive. The worst that could happen if you give up the big play, but the Ravens play very soft zones. I think they run cover 6 way more than they did in previous years. They run cover 3. They don't really run cover 2 that often. They really want to have help in the back end to prevent the big play, something that a lot of teams have adopted, but the Ravens are taking it to the next level. So I would love for them to be a little more aggressive. Just keep 2 high safeties. You don't need to have 3 corners up there. You don't need to have 3 safeties hovering over the first down marker. Just play aggressive. Trust your DBs to get the job done. Nate Wiggins has the speed. Marlon Humphrey has the experience. Brandon Stevens rarely, if ever, he's out of position because he doesn't really turn his head for the ball. But he's sticking to the receiver almost every time. He's right there. So have faith in your DBs. And if the first half comes along and you're giving up a couple of big touchdown grabs, fine, go back to what you're doing. But I would love to see them be aggressive in the early moments of this game and let the DBs prove that they belong, because I think they do.
Yeah, they do. Again, I don't think this is a talent issue with the secondary. It's just continuing to get familiar with Zach Orr's play calling, lighten up on those miscommunications, and I think the talent will speak for itself because it obviously has in years past. This could be an MVP battle, Sam. Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield. I mean, you look at some of these stats, Lamar, I mean, it just keeps getting better. Should say through week 6, but we roll through anyway. Number 1 in total yards, number 1 in net yards per attempt, number 1 in adjusted yards per attempt, number 3 in yards per completion, number 3 in yards per attempt, number 3 in passer rating, number 5 in passing touchdowns, number 6 in QBR, number 7 in passing yards. Man, try to say that 3 times fast. I probably won't be able. I wouldn't be able to do it. But this is going to be an epic quarterback battle, and I can't wait for the game. Sam, appreciate you hopping on. As always, I do have a final score prediction for you on the way out. I'm going Ravens 34, Bucks 30. I think the Ravens get the job done. Lamar moves to 23-1 against the NFC, but don't ask Lamar Jackson about the NFC record. He does not like to talk about it. Please, Sam, tell people where they can find you, what you're working on, and if you have a final score prediction, lay it on us.
Yeah, I'll go final score 37-20. I think that the Ravens are going to learn from their mistakes and get a little more aggressive. At least that's my hope, and that'll lead to a little less opportunities for Baker Mayfield. And of course, you can't stop the run. You can't stop Lamar Jackson. You're not going to get an opportunity to be on the field and score those points. So give me 37-20. Feeling a little confident about this Bucs game heading into Monday Night Football. But thank you again for having me. You can find me on YouTube at Ravens Talk Podcast. Find me on Twitter X at Ravens Talk Pod, Instagram at Ravens Talk Podcast, and you can find my podcast each and every week on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and we do pivotal moments where we do all 22 analysis of the game following a Ravens win, hopefully. So definitely tune in and subscribe.
Yeah, if you want film breakdowns, analysis on what the why and the how of Ravens wins, losses, hopefully not ties. We do not like ties here on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to go check out Sam. All the links to his work in the description down below, of course. But Sam, appreciate you and appreciate everybody for tuning in here today on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to, again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow along in audio form, video form, bring you 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. I'll probably see you back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens as we keep this content train going. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.